Hey everyone, welcome back to another College Chaps podcast. Well, as we face down the barrel of week 7 of football, on this episode we're going to reflect on quite an amazing week 6, but also look forward to some epic games of week 7. But first, for the College Chaps, I'm joined by my fantastically talented friend and co-host Ollie. How are you, sir?
Doing well, really, really well, my friend. Coming off the back of a week 6 slate that everyone thought was going to be the most boring in the season, turned out to be incredible. Heading into a week 7 slate, which has for a long time been lauded as this behemoth of the weekend of college football. And it all starts tonight. Weekday Conference USA is back. FIU at Liberty. By the time people are listening to this, the Flames will already likely have won their fifth game of the season. Lose track with Liberty because they had that game of App State cancelled. So, yeah, I'm very much looking forward to talking about what happened this weekend and what happened next weekend.
It's a roller coaster of a season, that's for sure. Our guest is better known to his listeners as the Show Pony, and you can hear him on Mad Dog Sports Radio on Sirius XM. He is the host of the hugely popular Full Ride on SXM College Sports Radio, along with his sidekick, Rick Newheisel. A big fan of UK football, our guest knows more about Chesterfield FC and in a first for the Chaps, Motherwell Football Club, than I care to know about. So it's awesome to welcome Chris Childers. Chris, hi, how are you?
I am thrilled to be here. I really am, because I probably love your culture as much as you love our culture, especially from a sporting perspective. So really, really excited to be. I've done God knows how many shows. I host shows every day, but first one I've done talking American football in Europe, which is pretty cool.
Well, you've done a lot of.
I've been on Chesterfield radio actually quite a few times, which is weird, but I have been a staple. I've been featured in Chesterfield FC books. It's this weird love affair. I'm a share owner, not a lot, but some. I got those behind me on the wall, and yeah, I watch every Saturday morning.
You were right. You were Ryan Reynolds before Ryan Reynolds came along.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
you're
yeah,
like,
he
come
just has
on.
a little bit more money, and man, they have really spent some money on that team, and I am amazed at the documentary's impact from a financial perspective and what they've thrown into it. But yes, it's kind of wild how Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney have kind of inspired a lot of new football fans in America.
It's amazing. Maybe that's an episode for another time because
Sure.
I've just finished watching the Burnley documentary and that's hugely interesting.
Hmm.
But we're not here to talk about football. We're here to talk about college football. Right, Chris. Let's go back a couple of weeks, right, before the world fell off its axis.
Huh.
And the best photograph I saw of that weekend was you on the sideline at Bryant Denny Stadium, watching
Hmm.
as Ryan Williams caught that pass. I was insanely jealous of that photograph. I hope that's going to be hanging on your wall soon.
Oh yeah.
How was that experience for you, first of all?
Going to that game was off the charts cool. We did a radio show from outside of the stadium at noon. So the game kicked at 6. Noon is kind of when things start to build up a little bit and you kind of feel that kickoff is on the horizon. So we had some really good energy. We were on from noon to 3. Greg Burton came by, the athletic director, the softball coach. Softball's huge at Alabama, Patrick Murphy, all kinds of different dignitaries. It was really neat. Had a lot of people, in good spirits. And then the game happened. And my God, I mean, first of all, it was like this incredible showcase for Alabama early. It was a party. I mean, literally every time out there, when they go to the, Dixieland Delight and all the other songs, it was as celebratory of an Alabama atmosphere as I've been in. And then all of a sudden it was
Hmm.
all of a sudden, and it was weird because they could not get off the field on 4th down. And we saw it against Vanderbilt on 3rd down. I think Vandy went like 13 of 18 or something, and pretty impressive against Alabama to be able to win that game. But at 5 of 5 on 4th down, they could not get off the field. As bad as Carson Beck, and he sucked for a lot of that game, as bad as he was, he kept converting on 4th, and all of a sudden they had the lead. And when they
Hmm.
got to the last 6 minutes of the game in America, they let the media members in the press box get down to the field. So you can watch the game from there, and then you can go interview players and stuff like that afterwards. So Last 6 minutes, we leave they have a great press box. If you've ever been in it, you'd love it. It's a great view, but not as cool as being on the field for one of the great games ever. So you get on the field and you get to really feel it. My producer, Allie, and Barrett Salee, who's a writer, we all work for Sirius XM. And so we kind of paired together and we were just like made a commitment that we were going to run back and forth. So if Alabama was going one direction, we were running that end zone. Georgia's going the other direction. We're running to that end zone. My fat ass has not had that much exercise in a while, believe me, but I was sprinting back and forth. We were there for, I have a brilliant video that I took, if I could pat myself on the back, of the game-winning interception, because we were right there standing in the end zone. But Ryan Williams was running by us, and you could see Allie's reaction in that picture where her mouth's kind of agape,
That's
like,
fantastic.
oh my God, because that was the next play. That was right after Georgia had taken the lead, and then Alabama immediately responded. The energy in that building, just being on the field afterward and hearing the Rammer Jammer Yellowhammer was, I just remember standing there after Ryan Williams scored. Excuse me. After Ryan scored, and I'm literally like, Big Al the elephant is maybe 2 feet behind me, and the cheerleaders are behind me. And I turn around and I look at them and then look up at the band and look at the fans. And the smile on my face was probably a mile long. I mean, it was like, this is too good. Like, I wish everybody in the world could be here to experience this, because they would fall in love with college football, whether they were American, Scottish, British, African, I don't care. I mean, if you were here in this moment, you would love this. There's no way you wouldn't be hooked. And what was so great about it to me, we've done everything in our power to screw this sport up over the last couple of years, like everything. Like, the people in charge, I'm sure you've talked about it a lot, but they have run it into a crazy situation where we have Cal and Miami playing league games at, the middle of the night. It's weird. I saw one of the guys you probably know, forgetting his name, but he covers the NFL in Scotland, I think. And he said he was waking up to drive to the London game, and the Miami game was like halftime. Like, it was like crazy. So it's weird having, that happen to an East Coast team and having to kind of adjust like that. But it reminded me that college football's foolproof. We can't screw it up, because the atmospheres, the kids being 18 to 22, the fact that we go to school at these places, and the emotional connection that we have with them, it can't be messed up. And I think I was reassured of that on 2 Saturdays ago.
And bizarrely, in the next week, right? So for Alabama fans who were on a complete high,
yeah,
they found the deepest low, as legend proved to us on the Paul Feinbaum show last night.
Oh my God!
But bizarrely, that just kept the college football train moving, right? Because we saw the other end of the spectrum, and we'll talk a little bit about I've been infatuated by the field goal procession and just tracking it and stuff like that. But before we touch on that, Chris, you touched a little bit on Alabama's kind of defensive decline in certainly the second half of the Georgia game, which continued into the Vandy game, and as legend told us last night, 67 points have been now conceded in the space of 4 or 5 quarters. So tell us what you think is happening with the Alabama defense.
They looked very confused. Diego Pavia's legs gave them a real issue if you watch that Vanderbilt game, and they didn't know what to do. They were highly confused, and as a result, they kept converting on 3rd down. I cannot explain what happened against Georgia. I thought they played a good defensive game until 4th down, and then they just could not get off the field. And then when you hit them 5 times in a row and you got a guy like Carson back, all of a sudden you're back in that game when you were winning pretty comfortably. The Vandy game to me was Kane Womack clearly has an issue with a guy that's athletic at quarterback. And Diego Pavia showed us a year ago. So Clark Lee, the head coach at Vanderbilt, he saw that film a year ago of New Mexico beating Auburn. And Diego Pavia was the quarterback. Jerry Kill was the head coach. And when Jerry was going to leave New Mexico State, it was New Mexico State, I think. And he said, look, we'll give you a spot here. They had a previous relationship, and we're going to essentially let you be the head coach of the offense. That's yours. I'm going to handle the defense. I'll be the CEO, but you are the head coach of the offense. And because of that, he was able to get Diego Pavia to transfer with him to Vanderbilt. And I think we see, I mean, that kid is smart. He's experienced. He's played a lot of football. And on top of it, you have a kid that can improvise with his legs when things break down. And I think for Alabama, they just were confused. Assignment football, the assignments were not there. They didn't know how to keep this guy in check. And because of it, he was able to get outside of the pocket when things broke down, improvise, get those guys out of balance. All of a sudden, dudes are coming up from the secondary and he's hitting guys on third down consistently. That happened over and over and over. Anybody who watched that game. So I live in Nashville. I live a mile and a half from campus, from Vanderbilt. I was not at the game because I was working. I was doing midday radio, which we do like a post-game, early game on Mad Dog, and then preview. Like this weekend, it was getting ready for Washington and Michigan. So one of those kind of deals. What was so interesting about it, my window, I had it open in my office because I do my show from home. And I kept hearing the horn. I kept hearing this foghorn. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because that's what they play when they score a touchdown. And I said, something bizarre is happening. So I look at the scoreboard. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This was early in the game. I think it was 13-0. Then all of a sudden, the thing keeps going on. So I'm like, all right, this something weird. So then I got the game on because I was watching a different game because I didn't think I had to pay attention to Vanderbilt and Alabama. And I'm kind of living vicariously through the sound through my window of the horn. This was so historic. Vanderbilt football, for those of you that have no concept of it, there's an SEC that has a robust 16 teams, and 15 of them are as passionate and as supported and as loved and as ingrained in the culture as any team in any city in any sport in the world. Okay, like Alabama football, if you've been to Tuscaloosa or the state at all, you understand what kind of love there is and how intense that is for Alabama football. Auburn's the same way. LSU, same way. Florida, go down the list of all of them. Then you get to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a team that I am not kidding. And Saban said this, and I know Vandy got all pissed about it, and they put it up on the Videotron, but it's not inaccurate. And as somebody who's been to probably over 100 games in that stadium, I can tell you all too well that Vanderbilt never plays a home game. They're always on the road because they're always playing in front of more fans for the other team. Alabama, I want to say, had at minimum 80% of the fan base there. At minimum. The entire one side of the stadium was completely crimson. That is not rare. That happens whenever they play anybody that's got a big fan base, whether it's Georgia, LSU, Arkansas will pack it, Ole Miss will pack it. I've seen all of them there. South Carolina, I've been a season ticket holder. I've been a guest coach during the spring game for the offensive line. I have lived every bit of that program. And that's what makes it all that much more crazy. It's not like Alabama went and lost a true road game to a bad team. They lost a road game, which was really a home game, to Vanderbilt. And that's inexcusable. That is an unforgivable sin to an Alabama fan, even after they beat Georgia last week.
Yeah, it's at both ends of the spectrum. We'll move quickly on to this week's slate. But before we do, all things good about college football we saw at the end of that game, Chris, when the goalposts came down and made their way along Broadway down into the Cumberland River, right? I mean, that's what makes college football special, isn't it?
It is. It is what I would show. So if somebody was in Scotland or England, and let's say I was visiting in Chesterfield for the week, right? And I was going to a couple of matches and I wanted to go support my guys in League Two. And if they asked me what I did for a living and I said I do American college football, the vast majority of them probably wouldn't know what I was talking about or wouldn't have any reference of it, other than those are the guys that go on to play in the NFL. What I would show them is moments like that. I would show them the Broadway march. If I know you've been to Nashville, George, but the walk from West End Avenue to Broadway, where they threw it into the Cumberland, is about 2.5 miles at least. Like, it's not a quick walk. I mean, you're going a ways down the street. I make that drive all the time, several times a week. I mean, it's not, traffic, you're sitting there, it takes a while, let alone walking it. But it was magical to see. You saw the night footage of the police officers in the helicopter, and it looked like this like zombie apocalypse of Vandy students falling, down the steps there to throw it into the goalpost. It's remarkable for a school that is Vanderbilt's a very, very prestigious school. Mm-hmm. It is considered, I think, one of the top 15 or 20 academic schools in our country. I think it's why they stick around the SEC, because of the academic cachet that they bring, because their athletic cachet outside of baseball is pretty bad. Baseball, they're actually very, very, very good. But football, they suck, and they've been sucky for a long, long time. So for them to beat Alabama cannot be undersold how beautiful it was. And I would show that moment, the goalposts, the walk down West End to Broadway. I would show Tennessee beating Alabama a couple of years ago and the goalpost going in the river. Those kind of moments, even 2 weeks ago at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I mean, you can't get there anywhere else. You can't get it anywhere else. The only thing that comes close to college football is European football. As you guys live and experience, every town, has their own team, and the passion is certainly real, and not every town and teams created equal, but the ones that are well financed are a religion in themselves. And I think that's what we have with college football in these towns like Tuscaloosa and places like that.
Chris, I live 12 miles away from the home of Chesterfield Football Club.
Do you really? Nice.
I do indeed. I do indeed.
Nice.
And I can concur that if you tell someone in Chesterfield or the surrounding areas
they would
that
not know.
Cover college football for a living, they have no idea what you're talking about. I've been there. I've experienced that.
Are you a Derby County fan? What are we dealing with here?
I am not a Derby County fan.
No.
All of my family are Derby County fans. I am not. I spend so much time watching college football. I actually haven't watched a soccer game for a long time. I was an Oldham Athletic fan growing up.
We are the exact opposite. I call football, and you call football soccer.
Well, I spend my days talking to American people.
I love that.
Than English
and
people.
I spend my day listening to Brits. It's funny. Yeah.
I would show someone who has never seen college football before the Red River rivalry.
Yes.
Because I think it is one of the greatest rivalry games in college football and one of the greatest rivalries in all of sport. Let's talk a little bit about that game, because it is one of the marquee games of this incredible slate of football in week 7.
It's one of the best rivalries. It is as American as apple pie. It is so the state fair happens around the game, and it's the Texas State Fair, and Texas is a massive, massive state. And a very, when you think of the stereotype of America with the cowboys and the boots, like, that's Texas. Really nowhere else, but that's Texas. George was just there. I mean, you weren't in the rural areas that are, kind of guys that are roping, cattle and all that, but you certainly were in a state that has a different feel to it. The state fair there is probably the biggest and most celebrated state fair in this country. And every kind of food that can possibly be fried, and we are a fatso country, myself included, will be consumed there. People's arteries will be clogged. It's a later start this year. It's like 3:00. So there are arteries. We got fried Oreos, fried Twinkies, they fry sticks of butter. I swear to God, and people eat them. It's unbelievable. It is ridiculously gross, but that's America. We're kind of gross. And that is a great, I think, there's two things I would show people. I would show them that in the Red River game, and I would show them a gas station in Texas called Buc-ee's. And Buc-ee's is the most American thing you'll ever see. It is essentially the size of a warehouse, and it's a gas station. And it's got like brisket and fudge and all. I mean, it's just insane. But the Texas State Fair is not far off. And that football game is kind of in the middle, in the heart of it. 50-50 down the middle. Half the crowd is Oklahoma, half the crowd is Texas. The weird thing is that Texas, all the pressure's on them to win this year. They're the one, Alabama just got beat, Tennessee got beat. So they're sort of in that weird position as a first-year member of carrying the mantle at the top of the SEC. And they've got that marquee win on the road against Michigan as kind of a feather in their cap. But Quinn Ewers will play. I don't think there's any. He could have played a couple of weeks ago, but they wanted to rest him. They wanted to make sure he was okay. Plus, they wanted to see what they had in Arch. A 3-game sample size against manageable teams to really see what you have. And, Arch then gets experience. And let's say Quinn gets hurt. Now this kid can come in and play. They have the best situation, period, of any team in this country at quarterback, because they got a kid who's a backup, who's a Manning, that's not pissed about his plight in life. He's not upset about being a backup. He's cool. He's fine. He knows his day is coming. He doesn't have a family pressuring and pushing, which is an incredible luxury for Steve Sarkisian. So because of that, I don't think it's like a lot of banter about who the guy is. I think Quinn is the guy, and Quinn has played at a very high level when he's been out there. Oklahoma's a little bit of a wild card, though. If you would have asked me a question a couple weeks ago about this game, I would have felt very comfortable telling you Texas would have won big. I think they've got something in this Michael Hawkins. I think they found something. This kid is an athlete. This kid can improvise when things break down. We saw a completion percentage against Auburn. I want to say it was high 60s, which was encouraging on the road in a big environment for a kid that's making a debut. They've had now a weekend to kind of digest and get him more reps. I think going into the Red River game, even though we talk a lot about point spreads in this country, it's a 14.5-point spread. I think Oklahoma could easily win this game, if that gives you an idea how I feel about this.
And it would cause absolute pandemonium. It would cause absolute pandemonium.
Well, kind of par for the course now after what's been going on.
Exactly. Yeah. Another great game this weekend, and one that has got equal potential for pandemonium and equal college football playoff permutations, is obviously Ohio State versus Oregon, number 2 versus number 3. Arguably the game of the day, unless you are a Texas Longhorn or an Oklahoma Sooner. What do you think the keys to winning this game are, Chris?
Yeah, Oregon is such an amazing case study for those that are not familiar with the background. That's Nike University. That is a team that is bought and paid for by the swoosh. Both you guys have it on your shirts right now. And that is Phil Knight's school. Phil Knight, who owns and founded Nike, has made that team what it is today. The reason they are so competitive, the reason they are in the Big Ten, the reason that we're talking about them getting to the playoff is because of, and it says it on his parking spot outside of the football complex, Uncle Phil and Aunt Penny, right? That's the Knight family. The basketball arena is named Matthew Knight Arena after the son. They have infused. Eugene, Oregon is a place that, it's like a living Grateful Dead concert. It's a hippie, kind of hot, smoky, seriously kind of place. Like that's what it, like Berkeley, California, what we saw on game day last week, very similar. But what they have is this power of the swoosh, and the power of the swoosh has allowed them to go out and get players like Dylan Gabriel away from Oklahoma. And that's something that Brent Venables has had to answer for in the first couple of weeks of the season when Jackson Arnold was struggling. Why the hell is this kid there? And it's just because Oregon's more powerful. They got more NIL money to be able to deal with because of the power of the swoosh. Ohio State comes in. I think Ohio State is the aggressor in this game for one reason specifically. There is a game that I cannot get out of my head where Boise State was playing Oregon, and Ashton Genty, who's been phenomenal, but he carved them up like a Thanksgiving turkey. And I look at Ohio State's line and I look at the running game with Quinshad Judkins and Travion Henderson, and I just think they're going to be able to hold the ball and they're going to be able to run downhill. And I think that's going to take a lot of what Oregon wants to do out of the equation, and they'll kind of grind them down. You know what I mean? They'll boa constrict them to a win on the road.
Which is kind of funny because that's how Oregon got the win over Ohio State
Yeah.
last time these two
Yeah.
teams met. It was Oregon absolutely annihilated them on the ground, and Ohio State couldn't do anything about it defensively. But they're such a better unit defensively than they've been in recent seasons. So if I had to push you for a score prediction, Chris, what would you go for this game?
See, I think it's going to be lower scoring than people think because of what I just said. I think Ohio State's going to try to dictate the clock. I think they're going to try to grind it. I think they'll feel comfortable if they're, high 20s, low 30s with their ability to win, if they can run the football effectively. The over-under is 53, which means Vegas thinks, 53 points total between the two teams. I would tend to go under that. I think we're looking at like 28-24 kind of a thing. I think that's what we're looking. Great game, close game, but I think Ohio State's run game is going to win the day.
Tell me, Chris, we're starting to get a shape of those teams that are contenders for the playoff. We're still undecided about many teams actually. You may just have answered this question, but if you were a college football coach, which team at this stage of the season would you want to avoid playing in the college football playoff? Who's kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, I think we'll find out more this weekend about those two. I think Texas is the obvious one, just from a pure dominant perspective, and they've looked good on both sides of the football. Now, I'll say this. If you asked me this question last week, I would have given you a different answer. I would have said I love Tennessee. I would have said Tennessee's my favorite. Tennessee's defense pins its ear back and just abuses other teams' backfields. I thought Nico was really becoming a star, and he wet the bed last week. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He was bad. And by him not even giving them a chance at the end by running out of bounds was really bad. So growing pains there, but certainly those are real growing pains. Bama, I would have had a different perception of a week ago than I do right now. So Texas is the one that I think jumps out. I think Ohio State hasn't played anybody yet. They played Michigan State, Iowa, nobody with an offense. They've been able to out-athlete people. I'm not sure what they are, and I'm very eager to see Dylan Gabriel perform against the defense of Ohio State's stature, which has been loaded. I mean, they really did a nice job in the portal this offseason of making sure that defense was elite. So Ohio State's the team that in the preseason here that everybody was kind of looking at as the favorite because of what they added. It was really, they were great at every position but quarterback. So I think we're kind of curious to see what Will Howard looks like in a road environment like this, because every other position, wide receiver, running back, offensive line, defense, across the board, all three levels, they're pretty damn stout with NFL type dudes. So quarterback's the mystery. We'll see. The kid that transferred away that was told he wasn't going to play is playing really well at Syracuse, Kyle McCord. So this is a prove it game for Will Howard in Ohio State.
Yeah, going to be interesting. Ollie, who do you think is going to win out on the Ohio State-Oregon game?
I think it's going to be extremely tight. I think, as Chris alluded to, I don't think we've seen what either of these teams truly are. And we were talking about this at Weir the other day. It's like with Oregon, there was this level of expectation this season that they were going to be really, really good. And you know what Bo Nix did in that offense, and you bring Dylan Gabriel, who I think is a better quarterback than Bo Nix, into that offense. And the expectation was they were going to kind of set fire to college football with Dylan Gabriel at the helm. And they kind of haven't done that yet. And is it a case of we're kind of slowly just working into this season and we're going to see them come to life against Ohio State? Or are they really truly just at this level that is kind of a little bit underwhelming compared to expectations? So I think it's going to be super interesting. I do think, like, you look at Ohio State, and we've talked about on this show before, and Chris alluded to it there, how they built this program in the offseason, the way they recruit, the way they retained talent using their NIL funds they really did a good job of keeping guys who probably would have gone to the NFL maybe 2, 3 years ago. They'd have gone, we're just going to go to the NFL. But they've been able to keep some of those guys. They've been able to recruit at a high level, and they've done great work in the transfer portal. So all the pieces are there for Ohio State to make a run this season. It's just, I think it's just as a guy who you're trying to maintain an element of neutrality when you're covering all 134 college football teams. Just looking forward to a great game. But
it's gonna be fun. Absolutely, it's gonna be fantastic.
It really is. It really is, and obviously the permutations for what happens with the Big Ten, because the Big Ten conference is fascinating.
Yeah,
I could talk about this all night, but there's a legitimate possibility that we get to the end of November and you've got 3-11-1 teams in the Big Ten, and Penn State will be absolutely laughing that the format of the Big Ten. They spent so long in that division with Ohio State and Michigan, and they could never challenge for the title. They're going to be there or thereabouts. It's a fascinating conference this year. So yeah, very much looking forward to Saturday.
They'll be the biggest beneficiary, I think, this week of just getting eyeballs on them, with Ohio State and Oregon. But Penn State's a huge beneficiary of a 12-team playoff. It changes the whole perception of the program, because they're always like 12-team good, but they're never 4-team good. But it'll change their perception.
Yeah, and we didn't have time to talk about. I think the SEC's taken a lot of the focus. I mean, the chaos in the SEC's grabbed everyone's attention.
Yeah,
but you look at what's been happening in the Big Ten. With Minnesota. I'm not saying they're a playoff team, but Minnesota winning, Michigan getting beat, right? So there's a lot of turmoil happening in the Big Ten as well. But as Ollie said, we could talk about this all night, and sadly we don't have the time. That's all from us on this episode. Chris, thank you for coming and chatting to us. But before you go, tell us and our listeners where they can hear you, what you've got coming up that we can watch out for.
Yeah, I know Sirius XM is not available over there, but you can check me out on Twitter at Childers Radio X, and I'm posting opinions and different clips of our radio show over there. I wish we're in North America exclusively, in Canada and the United States, and I think some parts of Mexico. But eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get there. Our group that owns Sirius XM Liberty Media is the same group that owns Formula One. So if we can get all around the country to race, why can't we get in every country with our radio? So hopefully we'll get to that point. But the best way to keep up with me at Childers Radio. Awesome.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, Chris. As you know, Chris joins our long list of truly awesome guests. So if you haven't already checked out previous episodes, please do. You can follow us on X and Instagram. And also now you can see the podcasts on YouTube. On YouTube, we are at the College Chaps podcast. Thanks again to Chris and Ollie for the brilliant input. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.